Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to continue the Endgame Strategy series with what I think is a very interesting Rook endgame which could happen in a real game or one of your real games with fair regularity. And this is an equal endgame to begin with. I want to make that clear. Neither side is better. If you turn on the engine, it says 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And even though it says that, it's clear that for humans, it would be easier to play white for one simple reason. Black has a weakness, white doesn't have a weakness. Now, as we know, usually in Rook endgames, especially in Rook endgames with very few open files, it's hard to win when you only have one weakness to exploit. In fact, it's probably impossible to win with only one weakness to exploit, as it should be in this endgame, and that's why an engine could draw. This is Andersson Huebner, played in Johannesburg 1981. This is an endgame I analyzed, I think a year ago, and it impressed me a lot. And I hope I managed to learn from it. So pause the video before we start if you want to make this interactive and more instructive than by just watching the video, and try to figure out what's going on. Again, you're not looking for moves, you're not looking for lines, you're not looking to calculate anything. You want to understand this endgame, you want to think schematically, you want to find out where your advantages or disadvantages lie, and you want to find a plan. And you also want to see what your opponent would like to do. Okay, the most important thing in this endgame, without which white could probably agree to a draw if black were to ask, is this pawn on c7. And this pawn is a permanent weakness which isn't going away. Why isn't it going away? Well, because there's a pawn on d4 fixing it. This is a backwards pawn, regardless of whether it stays on c7 or moves to c6. As long as black cannot get rid of his weakness with c5, the game should be equal. The game should be better for white, practically, excuse me. If he does, then the game is equal. If you can imagine these four pawns being traded off, then it's clearly a draw unless someone blunders a pawn or a rook or whatever. Okay, so how do you go about this endgame? Well, first things first, we need to put pressure on the pawn, and we need to use the fact that this rook is placed to, well, for us to gain a tempo. So we trade rooks. You don't have to do this. I don't think the engine says it's the best move, but once you trade off this rook on c6, which for the moment really is unable to move, you could defend it with the king, but then takes, king takes, and rook c1. And you've gained another tempo. Once you trade this rook off, this pawn is only going to be defended by the king and by this rook either from behind or with two tempi from the side. So rook fc1 and Huebner takes. Okay, king d6, this is normal. Now, in the game, Ulf Andersson played pawn to f3. Again, this isn't the only move, it's not completely necessary, but the idea is maybe sometimes to play for e4, sometimes to give your king the e3 square and to enter via the dark squares, and, well, basically prevent anything from coming to e4. In endgames where you have a pawn on d4, usually in rook endgames, black could try something like this. If the f-pawn wasn't on the board, then of course d4 would be a weakness unless e3 is played, and if e3 is played without the f-pawn, e3 would be just as weak as c7. Same thing. So this prevents anything from coming to e4 and maybe prepares king f2, king e3, king f4, and so on. So with the move f3, if I were black, I would be thinking, okay, white is trying to weaken my king side and create some squares for his king. If you can imagine my rook being on c2 and the pawn structure being fixed, let's make a couple of moves. Let's try to fix the pawn structure. Okay, let's go h5, let's go h4, and let's play a stupid move like f5. If f5 is played, white is immediately winning, because now there are ways to enter the position. You can simply play rook c2 and when something like this is played, you can eventually try to come in, try to provoke enough weaknesses to come in. You could even try trading rooks like this, and once the trade is declined, then you move on to e5 and then king e3, king f4, and so on. I would just like to point out one thing. In this position after king d6, a mistake that I looked at briefly when I was analyzing the game, and I think it's an important mistake to show, is trying to over-defend the c5 square and trying to fix the pawn permanently with b4. And that move should cross your mind in some positions, but in this case it's not good, and I think it's instructive to see why. I would like you to figure out why by yourself. I'm going to tell you. The one hint I'm going to give you is if the a2 pawn was on a5, then b4 would be an excellent move. Okay, so if you play b4, black should immediately be better, and that's simply because of rook a8. Rook a8 threatens a5, and not only does it get rid of your b pawn, but once your a pawn, if you defend, gets to b4, then black has a weakness that's easier to exploit than the weakness on c7. For example, if you play a3 and I go a5, if you take, then clearly a3 is weaker than c7, so let's say e3 and takes and takes, and now you can choose between rook a4, rook a2. Your king is going to have a hard time coming into the game. Black should be better. After rook a8, you could try rook c3, and after something like a5, rook a3, but this obviously is passive. Should be equal, but if anybody is better, it's black. So b4, trying to fix or overfix the weakness with the possibility of a5 is a bad idea. Okay, f3. c6 was played, doesn't really make a difference. One more thing, you don't need to play b4 because rook c8 is not a threat. After f3, if rook c8 is played, you don't have to allow c5. You can simply play rook c5. You always have that. So b4 is basically unnecessary. Again, this is another point I wanted to highlight because I was doing that in my analysis. Okay, c6. King f2, fine, rook e8, g4. Okay, now, since we know that the position is equal, and it's still equal, and we still have the same weaknesses to work with, or the one weakness to work with, we need to create something more. So what we're looking to do, as we said, is create some squares on the king side. Now, for the moment, they don't exist, so Ulf Andersson is patiently trying to create them. Okay, a5 played, this is okay, nothing wrong with that. h4 played, and now g6. g6 is fine, preventing h5. Doesn't really create too many weaknesses because it's going to be hard for the king to come in, or this way, it doesn't really matter. So rook c2 played, and in this position, h6 was played, which is fine, preventing both g5 and h5. I would just like to show that there was an easier way to prevent anything from happening on the king side. And again, this is, in my mind, instructive. This move I missed. I actually wanted to wait with black in this position, but I had entertained the idea of g6, but I was kind of afraid to create a hook. But after h5, I think you can play g5 and get away with it, although I'm not sure. So I was looking at g6, but I decided not to weaken myself. Yeah, instead of g6, there was a much cleaner move, and that's h5. Of course, if that is taken, then rook h8, and I wouldn't say black is much better, but I would like to be black because you have a potential passed pawn and white doesn't. So after h5, white shouldn't take. Let's say e3, let's say black waits, let's say white waits. I don't really know how to make progress here. Black waits. Again, if you ever take, then rook h8, and let's say king to g3, rook h5 should be equal. I don't think white can win this. Okay, but g6 is played, which is still okay. Rook c2 was played, now preparing to enter with the king. Okay, and in this position h6, and this means your king is never entering the position. There's nothing you can do. King g3. Okay, now What black should be doing here is simply waiting. And in my mind, this is one of the most instructive moments in the game, because I know this is something that I might do. So have a think here and try to find a safe waiting move for black. You understand that you are not winning this game. There is no way you can win it because you have no way to make progress. Try not to blunder. Okay, if we turn on the engine, it says 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. B4 is fine, but it's not a safe move in my opinion. You're changing the nature of the position. So what I would do, I would just play rook e3 or rook e7 or something safe. Let's say rook e3, rook e8, rook e3, rook e8. Unless white plays king f2 and rook c3 and rook e3, and then there's a drawn pawn endgame, I don't even see a way to change the position after that. Okay, what Huebner did, and he was a very strong player at the time, of course, is what I think a weak player would do. He changed the nature of the position, which is the first bad thing, and someone said, I believe Ben Feingold in one of his videos, and that really struck me as instructive. If a move changes the nature of the position, it's usually either really good or really bad, and that may be an exaggeration, but it's actually a good rule to play by. And if a move changes the nature of the position, changes the pawn structure, you need to analyze it a lot, and you need to figure it out completely, and you need to know how the change is going to affect the position. Of course, you could be winning after that, you could be losing, nothing major could be going on, but sometimes it could change the position for the worse. Okay, so the blunder. He played pawn to g5, and this, according to the engine, should probably still be a draw. It's plus 0.7. It's a big advantage now. It was all zeros, but maybe you can draw. The reason this is a blunder, it's not because you weaken the dark squares. Maybe he thought, okay, the king is never coming in. It's because you create a second weakness. After h5, you now have two weaknesses you need to be concerned about. And now the plan is actually fairly simple. Again, if you want, you can pause the video and try to find the plan to go forward with white. Again, the position is not clearly winning. The engine says plus 0.5, plus 6, plus 7. But try to find a way to go forward. Okay, now in this position, the pawn on h6 and the pawn on c6 are weaknesses. And what you would like to do is somehow enter the f5 square and the f6 square. So what I would do if I were white, I would try to play king to f2, and I would try to play pawn to e3, and maybe king to d3, and maybe play for e4, or I would try the plan I mentioned with king to f2, rook to c3, rook to e3, trying to do that. Now, that's not easy to do, and I'm not sure I'm winning, but I would try to do that. Okay, in the game, Huebner played pawn to f6, which is another blunder. So he played two clear blunders in a row. Why is this a blunder? Well, now, if my king ever gets here, I win. So f6 is... I don't understand f6. If my opponent played f6 and they didn't know his rating, I would assume he was below 1500. I don't know. I don't know what the idea is. Basically, f6 weakens the positions irreparably. Now it is winning. Now the engine says +1, which sometimes isn't winning in rook endgames, but for humans after f6, this should just be like a flashlight in the dark, these light squares. Okay, king f2 played, king to c7, e3, king to b6, just improving the position, king e2, rook c8, rook c5, preventing c5, rook e8, king to d3. Okay, now as we said, he wants to play e4. Once e4 is played, the king is coming in. Either the king is coming in if the rook moves away and you take with the king. Rook e7 was played in this position, and e4. So if this is taken, you simply take back, and now how do you prevent me from winning this position? I don't think you can. Okay, so that cannot be taken. So after e4, either the king is coming in if the rook moves away, or this pawn is sometimes falling. Okay. Rook to d7 was played in this position. Okay, now we actually have to analyze something. This is the first position where a forced variation needs to be calculated until the end. First of all, I hope you can figure out what's to be calculated. Secondly, I hope you can calculate it correctly. I did, and I was really happy when I did it. Okay, so you're calculating a win and trying to figure out whether a move is winning. The move is e takes d5. You can pause the video if you didn't calculate it yet. Okay, some of the variations are pretty forcing, in fact most of them. Okay, e takes d5. If c takes d5, the game is over after rook c8. We don't have to look at that. That's simple. We are going to win this pawn and we are going to win the game. There is no way to defend. Okay, so after e takes d5, rook takes d5 has to be played. Now, of course, we don't look at rook d5, that's a draw. We look at king e4. And we have to calculate a couple of things. We have to calculate the rook retreating and the rook taking on c5. Let's do the rook retreat first, because that's easy to calculate. If rook d7, we can go back, just not allowing after king to f5, rook takes d4. So we retreat, and let's say rook to e7 check and king to f5, that should be winning. I don't see a move for black that prevents this after rook to c2. I don't know. I don't know. Well, actually, let's try rook to d5. I don't want to repeat, of course. I'm not going to play. Okay, I'm going to turn on the engine because I didn't check this. It should be winning. This should be winning, but I don't want to repeat. So I can just go a3 and force black to wait. Yeah, we just force black to wait. But what if a4? Okay, now we switch to the f file. So why do we need rook c1? I don't understand. This is not good. Why is rook c1 a good move? Okay, now we force him to take or to move away. Okay, this is not easy. I'm sorry for not preparing this. I just assumed that after rook to d7, black isn't going to go back. But if black goes back, it's winning, but you need to be more precise. Again, if rook to d5, we prepare b4, and if a4, we can just wait, and black is in Zugzwang. Yeah, black is in Zugzwang because if king c7, rook c5, if king b7, again rook c5. And now the rook cannot be taken. Okay, so it's about Zugzwang. That's not easy to see, I'm sorry. Okay, so e d5, rook d5, king e4, we looked at the rook moving back. Doesn't matter if it moves to d8 or to d6. Okay, now let's have a look at rook c5. And this is the forcing variation. So takes, king f5. And I hope you saw that this isn't winning. After king to d5, king takes f6, black actually has time for a4. And after king to g6, king to e6, once you take, I can just go a3 first of all, creating a passed pawn of my own, and after you go ba3, for example, I just go king f6, and you're not doing anything, because I have, if you ever play f4, I have two passed pawns. Okay, so in this position, e takes d5 wasn't winning, but there were possibilities for black to go badly wrong. a3 was played. Okay. After a3, the engine says the position is closer to equal, but a3 is a very understandable move. Why? Well, what he would like to do is play the same variation with b4. As we saw, after e d5, rook d5, king e4, and takes, the king was able to take on c5. If there's a pawn on b4, the king isn't able to take. Okay, so a3 is preparing b4, which would prepare ed5 and actually make it winning. Okay, Huebner just waits, not knowing what's going on in the position, and it surprised me a lot that Andersson didn't play b4 now. So as a weaker player like me, when you're looking at the game and analyzing it and trying to figure it out, you look at a move like a3 and you think to yourself, okay, b4, why b4? ed5 didn't work because of king c5, so a3 because of b4, because of ed5. And now he doesn't play b4. And that was really strange to me. If b4 is played, the game should be over immediately. There is almost nothing to calculate. Let's look at waiting first. If rook d7, then ba5, and we win the c6 pawn, so you cannot wait. If king c7, we just take. Again, same thing. Or we can take here first. If a takes b4, then a takes b4. Again, completely winning. You can, again, I'm threatening ed because there's a pawn on b4. If you move away, then I can just start taking pawns. And you don't even have time to win the f3 pawn, because if you check me, I can go here. Okay, if a4 blocking the position, then we have a pawn on b4 and just ed5. And that's it. The same variation simply works. You cannot take with the pawn, you cannot take with the rook, you cannot do anything. Okay, instead, Andersson played rook c1, which was astonishing to me. Okay, rook to d7 was played just waiting. And in this position, if you look at the engine evaluation, it actually says that ed5 is winning now. And here is why. Black is actually in Zugzwang after rook to c1. And I mean, b4 was easily winning. But maybe Andersson wanted to win sadistically, and I think this is a much harder idea to find for us, which aren't as strong as Grandmasters, or especially top in the world Grandmasters like Andersson at his peak. So what's the problem? Well, you could be playing e takes d5. However, if there's a rook on c8, it's not easy, on d8, it's not easy to play rook c8. After rook to c1, Huebner played rook to d7. And again, I tried to figure out rook c1 when I was analyzing the game by myself. And the reason I thought he played rook c1 was to play ed5 here. And this is completely winning, but he didn't play it. Why? Now if you take with the rook, then king e4 wins. And I don't think it's hard to see. You can just, you're entering the position. And if after ed5, cd5 is played, then rook c8 wins. You are winning the pawn, and that's it. If rook h7, rook f8. But after rook d7, he played rook c2. And now rook d8, again, the same threat doesn't apply. So first after a3, he didn't follow up with b4, and then after rook c2 and rook d7, he didn't take on d5. I thought that was strange. Okay, rook c3 played, now waiting again. The position should be permanently better for white and winnable regardless of what happens, so maybe he's just following the rule of not rushing, which could be correct, but it's still strange. Rook d7 again, ed5, same thing, ed5 winning. Rook c2 waiting, rook d8. And now he played rook c1. And after rook to d7, again, he could have done the same thing. I don't know why he didn't. Now, there's a variation I would like to show you, because after Andersson's next move, this move, rook c5, the game should be completely equal. Rook c5 is a huge blunder, and I'll try to explain why, but it's not going to be easy. a4 was the way to punish rook c5. And in this position, black should be able to hold because it's not easy to break through. I'll try to show you why and how. Firstly, the same variations after king c5 or ed5 and king c5 and so on are more favorable for black now because his pawns are closer to queening. So let's have a look at that. If ed5 and rook d5 and king e4 and rook c5 and dc5, black actually wins. Okay, if you try, okay, just let me tell you the evaluation. -5, okay, king f5 and you just move away, and again we do the same thing, but now we are a few steps closer to queening. If you try picking up the pawns, then we just queen, and black is actually quicker. Okay, now let's have a look at that in this position. While the rook is on c1, so the moves played were rook d7 and rook c5, and then a4 would be a draw. Why didn't the same thing work here after rook c1? If a4 is played now, while the rook isn't on c5, then we can take, and if rook d5, again, king e4, and this should be winning easily because the king came in. And if cd5, we can now play rook c5, and it's Zugzwang. The king cannot move away because if it moves to b7 or a7, we take on b5. If it moves to a6, we play rook c6, take on f6. If it moves to a5, again, we can go rook to c6, and after rook f8, we can go rook to d6. If the rook moves away, for example, rook d6 or rook d7, then rook c8. And again, we win the same way. So we actually need a Zugzwang position to win that if a4 is played. So after rook c1, rook d7, rook c5 was played, and a4 worked. Let's try the same thing again. I'll just try to show it to you. So a4, ed5, if cd5 here, and you move your rook away somewhere, then I can just go rook c8. Wait, why couldn't I go rook c8 now? Oh, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Okay, so rook d5 is the only thing that saves you. I'm sorry, this is a very complex endgame, and I thought I'd figured everything out. Okay, so rook c5, a4 would be a draw, but rook d8 played. And now finally, he plays b4. And it's the same thing as before. You cannot take, you cannot advance, you cannot ignore it. And once b4 has been allowed, which again, he could have played 20 moves ago, as I showed you, and it was always a pattern, the game should be over. ab4 was played, ab4, rook d7, but now ed5, the rook can come into c8. Again, if cd5, rook c8, so rook d5, king e4. Of course, now rook c5 doesn't work, so the rook has to move away somewhere, and now it's easy. You can play, can you play king f5? I think you can, but it's unnecessary. He played d5, just not giving up the pawn. If you take and we trade everything, the pawn endgame is obviously winning for white. Why? Because my king is much closer. Okay, and if cd5, rook d5, and for example rook e8, then we go here. Something similar happened in the game. After d5, rook e8 was played, king f5, cd5, rook d5, king e3 was played, king f6, rook f3 check, king g7, rook f4, rook d6 check. It doesn't matter, you can take on h6 as well. Here takes rook a6. Yeah, I think after rook h6, yeah, after rook h6, Huebner resigned, but after rook h6, if you, for example, take on g4, and I rook somewhere, doesn't matter, rook a6, then rook b4 and h6, and I'm going to have a rook for 2 pawns, and your king is cut off, so it's completely winning. So coming back to the original position, the first thing he did was traded off a pair of rooks, put pressure on c7. And then there was no way to make progress until Huebner gave him a chance with g5. And after g5, h5, he made it even worse with f6. After f6, a human, I don't think, would mess this up. Even though, as we saw, black had the amazing resource of a4 at one point, that's really hard to see. And probably they were tired and stuff. Okay, I hope you got something from this endgame. I enjoyed it a lot when I analyzed it, and I think it's very instructive. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.